12 Messerschmitt 109s diving from 25,000 feet. A scattered formation of 6 Spitfires caught low and slow over the channel. No altitude, no speed, no room to run. The squadron leader barks the order to brake and dive, the textbook response. But one pilot does something no one in the Royal Air Force has ever attempted. He pulls back on the stick and climbs straight up into the diving enemy formation. They think he is panicked. 30 seconds later, they are scrambling to understand how he is still alive. September 1941. The skies over southern England are a killing field, measured in altitude and airspeed. The Luftwaffe has refined the art of the high-side gun pass into a science of murder. German fighters climb to operational ceiling, position themselves above and behind incoming RAF patrols, then roll inverted and dive at terminal velocity. The mathematics are brutal and simple. A Messerschmitt at 400 miles per hour in a 70-degree dive covers the distance to its target in seconds. The closing speed gives Allied pilots almost no reaction time. By the time you see the enemy, he is already firing. The Spitfire Mark V is fast in level flight, nimble in turns, beloved by its pilots. But it cannot outclimb a Messerschmitt with a 5,000-foot altitude advantage. It cannot outrun one in a dive. Doctrine is clear. When bounced from above, brake hard, dive for the deck, use speed and separation to escape the engagement zone. It works sometimes. Most times, it does not. Loss rates for RAF Fighter Command in the autumn of 1941 hover near 15% per sortie in contested airspace. Squadrons bleed experienced pilots faster than training commands can replace them. The sound of it is unforgettable. The howl of Merlin engines at combat power. The snap and rattle of machine gun fire walking across aluminum skin. The scream of a Daimler-Benz engine in a near-vertical dive. Then the wet crunch of impact, or the terrible silence when a parachute fails to deploy. Pilots do not talk about the statistics in the mess halls. They drink tea, play cards, write letters they know might never be mailed. Ground crews scrub blood from cockpits and patch bullet holes with the efficiency of assembly line workers. Intelligence officers compile loss reports and send them up the chain where they disappear into filing cabinets. Everyone knows the war in the air is a war of attrition. Everyone pretends the numbers do not apply to them. The channel smells of salt and aviation fuel. Contrails crisscross the gray September sky like chalk marks on a killing floor. Below the water is cold and unforgiving. Ditching means hypothermia in minutes. Most downed pilots are never recovered. Into this meat grinder flies a man who does not belong. A quiet thinker with a degree in aeronautical engineering and a habit of filling notebooks with equations no one else bothers to read. His name is Richard Mallory, and he is about to rewrite the rules. The interior of a Spitfire cockpit at 20,000 feet is a study in controlled discomfort. The canopy fogs with breath. The stick vibrates with engine harmonics. Cold seeps through the aluminum frame despite leather gloves and fleece-lined boots. Visibility is obstructed by the long nose. Pilots crane their necks constantly, scanning above and behind, knowing the attack will come from the sun or the clouds or the blind spot they cannot cover. The oxygen mask chafes. The radio crackles with static and clipped voices calling out positions and threats. Below, the patchwork fields of Kent and Sussex blur into abstraction. Above, the sky is empty until it is not. Then everything happens at once. The Luftwaffe's tactics are ruthlessly efficient. Messerschmitts patrol at maximum altitude along the bomber routes and fighter corridors. When they spot RAF formations below, they position themselves upwind and upsun. The lead aircraft signals. The formation splits into pairs. They roll inverted and dive. By the time the Spitfire pilots see them, the geometry is already fatal. Diving gives the Messerschmitt every advantage. Gravity adds velocity. The engine does not starve for fuel in negative G like the early Spitfire carburetors. The pilot has the energy to dictate terms, to shoot and break away, to climb back to altitude and repeat. The British pilot has one move: dive. Trade altitude for speed, break the attack angle, force the enemy to pull out or overshoot. Then run for home at full throttle and pray the fuel lasts. Sometimes it works. The Messerschmitt overshoots or loses sight in the dive. Sometimes it does not. The German pilot anticipates the break, adjusts his dive angle, and stitches cannon rounds through the fleeing Spitfire from tail to cockpit. September losses are catastrophic. 11 Squadron loses 4 pilots in 2 weeks. 64 Squadron loses 6. The replacement pilots arrive fresh from operational training units with barely 200 hours total time. They are eager, young, and profoundly unprepared. Most last 3 sorties. Some last 1. Commanding officers write letters to families in careful script. They describe courage and sacrifice. They do not describe the sound of a man screaming over the radio as his aircraft burns. They do not describe the empty chairs in the mess or the way mechanics avoid eye contact when another pilot fails to return. In the officers' billets, pilots sleep poorly. They wake to the sound of engines that are not there. They smoke too much. They joke with forced lightness about odds and luck. A few keep diaries. Most stop writing after the first month. The future extends only as far as the next mission brief. Into this environment comes Flight Lieutenant Richard Mallory, transferred from a training command posting. Older than most fighter pilots at 28, thin, pale, with round spectacles that fog in the cockpit. He carries a leather satchel full of notebooks, covered in diagrams and calculations. His squadron mates call him the professor behind his back. Some call him worse. Richard Mallory does not look like a fighter pilot. He is tall and angular, all elbows and knees folding awkwardly into the Spitfire's narrow cockpit. His hands are steady, but his manner is hesitant. He speaks in complete sentences, pausing to choose words with the precision of a man drafting a technical report. His eyes are gray and constantly calculating, as if measuring angles and distances even at rest. He graduated from Cambridge in 1937 with honors in aeronautical engineering. While classmates joined aircraft manufacturers or pursued postgraduate research, Mallory enlisted in the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve. His father, a banker, called it a waste of education. His instructors called it admirable but puzzling. Mallory called it necessary. He wanted to understand flight not in theory but in practice, not on paper but in 3 dimensions at 250 miles per hour. Flight training exposed a contradiction. Mallory was technically flawless. His instrument work was textbook. His navigation was precise. But he lacked the aggression instructors wanted in fighter pilots. He overthought engagement scenarios. He questioned tactical doctrine in ways that annoyed his superiors. One evaluation noted excessive hesitation during simulated combat. Another flagged him for requesting engineering specifications mid-flight exercise. He was assigned to bombers, then reassigned to training command, then quietly shuffled to a fighter squadron that needed bodies more than it needed aces. 66 Squadron, operating Spitfire Mark V's out of Biggin Hill, received Mallory in late August 1941. Squadron leader Jeffrey Blackwood read his file with visible skepticism. A Cambridge engineer who had spent 2 years teaching cadets instead of fighting Germans. Blackwood assigned him to Red Section, the 3rd Flight, the position reserved for new or uncertain pilots. Mallory's first sortie was uneventful. His second resulted in a brief encounter with a lone Messerschmitt that he neither engaged nor evaded with distinction. His third mission, he returned early with engine trouble that mechanics could not replicate. Rumors started quietly. The professor was cautious, too cautious. Some whispered he was afraid. Others said he was simply out of place, a thinker in a job that demanded instinct. Pilot Officer Jimmy Crawford, a 22-year-old with 4 kills and a subscription to his own legend, made the mockery explicit. He asked Mallory loudly in the mess whether he had calculated the exact probability of surviving the war. Mallory answered yes, 2.3% based on current loss rates and projected sortie counts. The room went silent. Crawford laughed. Others joined in, uncertain whether Mallory was joking or insane. Mallory did not smile. He returned to his notebooks. In them, he sketched power, curves, thrust-to-weight ratios, and climbing performance at various airspeeds. He was working on a problem everyone else had accepted as unsolvable. Richard Mallory grew up in a brick townhouse in Reading, where silence was a virtue and curiosity was tolerated if it did not interrupt dinner. His father managed accounts at a regional bank. His mother taught piano to neighborhood children. They were comfortable, reserved, and faintly disappointed when their son showed no interest in either finance or music. He preferred to disassemble clocks and study the geometry of staircases. At 12, he built model airplanes from balsa and tissue paper, not for play, but to test weight distribution and wing loading. He varied designs, recorded results, and tried to understand why some flew and others spun into the ground. His schoolmasters at Reading Grammar found him strange but harmless. He earned top marks in mathematics and physics. He won a scholarship to Cambridge and studied under Professor Edmund Hartley, a former Royal Aircraft Establishment engineer who taught aerodynamics with an emphasis on practical problem-solving. Hartley assigned unconventional exercises. Calculate the turn radius of a Hawker Fury at various speeds. Determine optimal climb angles for different power-to-weight ratios. Mallory thrived. He saw flight as a series of compromises between thrust, drag, lift, and weight. Change one variable and the others shifted. Mastery meant understanding the relationships, not memorizing procedures. One lecture stayed with him. Hartley discussed energy states in combat. Altitude was potential energy. Airspeed was kinetic energy. A diving attacker traded potential for kinetic, gaining speed at the cost of height. The defender typically did the same, diving away. But Hartley posed a question. What if the defender climbed instead? The class dismissed it. Climbing bled airspeed. A slow aircraft was a dead aircraft. Hartley did not argue. He simply noted that physics did not care about doctrine. If the math worked, the maneuver worked. Mallory returned to that question throughout his training. He ran calculations in the margins of his logbook. A Spitfire at cruise speed had enough kinetic energy to convert into a short, steep climb. If timed correctly, the climbing aircraft could force a diving attacker into an overshoot. The attacker, committed to his dive, would flash past below, his energy state now inferior. The climber could reverse and hold the advantage. On paper, it was sound. In practice, every instructor Mallory showed it to called it suicidal. Climbing toward an attacker violated every survival instinct. It closed the distance, presented a larger target, and bled the one thing that kept you alive: speed. Mallory argued the math. They argued experience. Experience won. Mallory stopped mentioning it, but he did not stop thinking about it. He filled notebooks with refinements, optimal climb angles, required entry speeds, timing windows, measured in fractions of seconds. He knew it could work. He simply needed the chance to prove it. That chance came on September 14, 1941. The briefing room at Biggin Hill smells of damp wool and stale cigarette smoke. Squadron Leader Blackwood stands before a map of the channel marked with red and blue grease pencil. The mission is simple, on paper. Escort a flight of Bristol Blenheims targeting German shipping near Calais. Provide cover during the bombing run. Return before fuel runs critical. Expected opposition is moderate. Intelligence reports suggest Luftwaffe fighter activity has decreased in the sector over the past 48 hours. The pilots know better than to trust intelligence. Mallory sits in the third row, his notebook open on his lap. He has already calculated fuel consumption at various power settings, estimated time over target, and marked the point of no return on his knee pad chart. Around him, Younger pilots joke nervously. Crawford brags about a girl he met in Dover. Flight Sergeant Tom Hendricks, Mallory's assigned wingman, cleans his fingernails with a pocket knife. He is 31, a career NCO who flew Hurricanes during the Battle of Britain. He has survived 63 combat sorties through a combination of caution and situational awareness. He does not trust Mallory, but follows orders. The briefing ends. Pilots collect their gear and walk to the dispersal area where Spitfires wait in revetments. Engines cold, propellers still. Ground crews perform final checks. Chief Mechanic Walter Harris approaches Mallory and mentions casually that his aircraft, coded Red 3, has been running rich on the port magneto. Nothing dangerous, but it might affect climb performance. Mallory thanks him and makes a mental note. Reduced power means reduced energy available for vertical maneuvers. He adjusts his calculations accordingly. The flight takes off at 09:15 hours, 6 Spitfires in 2 sections, climbing southwest over Kent. The sky is clear with scattered clouds at 15,000 feet. Visibility is good, too good. It makes them easy to spot from above. They rendezvous with the Blenheims at 12,000 feet and form up in loose escort formation. The bombers are slow, their Bristol Pegasus engines laboring under full bomb load. The Spitfires weave above and behind, trading airspeed for position. Mallory flies on the left flank, Hendricks slightly behind and to his right. The formation crosses the coast at Dover. Below, the channel is gray-green and featureless. Ahead, the French coast is a dark line on the horizon. Radio chatter is minimal. Blackwood calls out heading changes. The bomber leader acknowledges. Minutes stretch. Then Crawford's voice cuts through, high and tight. Bandits, 11 o'clock high. Mallory looks up and left. At first he sees nothing. Then the glint of canopy glass, 25,000 feet above, catching sunlight. He counts silhouettes. 12 aircraft in 4 flights. Of 3, Messerschmitt 109s, positioned perfectly for a bounce. They have altitude, position, and initiative. Blackwood's voice is calm and clipped. All aircraft prepare to break on my mark. Mallory's hands tighten on the stick and throttle. His heart rate does not increase. His breathing remains steady. He is calculating. The enemy will dive at approximately 400 miles per hour. Closure rate will be 600 miles per hour combined. Time from initiation to firing range is 18 seconds. Standard evasive brake and dive will require 7 seconds to execute. He will be under fire for 11 seconds. Probability of survival, 12%. Unless the Messerschmitts roll inverted and begin their dive. Blackwood shouts, "Brake now." 5 Spitfires snap hard left and dive toward the deck. Mallory pulls back on the stick and climbs straight into the enemy formation. The Merlin engine roars at emergency power. The airspeed indicator drops. 190 miles per hour, 180. The nose rises past the horizon, past 30 degrees, past 45. Mallory holds the climb angle, feeling the aircraft decelerate, feeling the controls grow mushy as airspeed bleeds away. His vision narrows. Gravity presses him into the seat. The altimeter unwinds. 13,000 feet, 13,500. Around him, the sky is empty, except for 12 dark shapes growing rapidly larger. The lead Messerschmitt is committed to his dive. His wingman follows. They are pointing downward at 70 degrees, engines screaming, cannon armed. They expect their target to be diving away, to be fleeing. Instead, Mallory's Spitfire is climbing toward them, nose high, closing the distance at an impossible angle. The geometry confuses them. Their firing solution evaporates. Mallory watches the lead aircraft flash past 200 feet to his right, a gray blur with yellow spinner and black crosses. The pilot's head is visible in the canopy, turned, looking back, expression unreadable. The wingman overshoots left. Both aircraft scream past, below now, diving into empty air where the Spitfire should have been, but is not. Mallory reaches the top of his zoom climb at 14,000 feet. Airspeed has dropped to 120 miles per hour. The Spitfire shudders on the edge of a stall. He pushes the stick forward gently, not diving, converting altitude back into airspeed. The nose drops through the horizon. He rolls inverted, pulls through, and reverses toward the enemy formation. The second pair of Messerschmitts adjusts. They see the maneuver now, understand the trick. They split, one left, one right, intending to bracket him, but they are still diving. Their energy state is committed. Mallory rolls hard right, pulls into a climbing spiral, trades his remaining airspeed for another 1,000 feet. The Messerschmitt on the right tries to follow. He cannot. His dive speed is too high. He pulls hard, grays out, overshoots again. Mallory is above him now. He rolls out, pulls lead, and fires a 2-second burst. Tracer rounds arc across the sky. Some strike the Messerschmitt's tail. Pieces fly off. The German brakes hard, left, trailing smoke, diving away. The rest of the formation scatters. They are no longer hunters. They are confused, angry, cautious. Mallory dives away at full throttle, heading west toward the channel. His fuel is critical. His engine temperature is redlined. His hands are shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up to calculation. Hendrick's voice crackles over the radio. Red 3, what the hell was that? Mallory does not answer. He is too busy flying, too busy watching his fuel gauge, too busy calculating whether he has enough to reach England. The French coast falls behind. The channel spreads below, vast and indifferent. Mallory flies at 50 feet above the waves, throttled back to conserve fuel. The engine coughs once, twice. He switches tanks. The engine smooths. Ahead, the white cliffs of Dover appear through haze. He crosses the coast at Folkestone, climbs to pattern altitude, and lands at Biggin Hill with less than 10 gallons remaining. The Spitfire rolls to a stop. Mallory shuts down the engine. Silence. He sits in the cockpit, hands still on the controls, breathing slowly. Ground crew runs toward him. Harris pulls the canopy back and stares. You're hit. Mallory looks down. There are 3 bullet holes in the fuselage behind the cockpit. He had not noticed. He climbs out, legs unsteady, and walks toward the debriefing room. Behind him, mechanics examine the aircraft, counting holes, shaking their heads. The debriefing room is small and overheated. Squadron leader Blackwood sits behind a wooden desk, his flight log open, his pen poised. Mallory sits across from him, still wearing his Mae West and helmet. The other pilots stand along the wall, watching. Blackwood's voice is controlled but tight. Explain what happened. Mallory describes the maneuver in technical terms. He notes the altitude differential, the closure rate, the energy conversion from kinetic to potential. He explains how the climbing zoom forced the diving attackers into an overshoot, how their committed energy state prevented them from matching his maneuver, how the geometry reversed their advantage. He speaks in the flat tone of an engineer presenting data. Blackwood listens without interrupting. When Mallory finishes, the room is silent. Then Crawford laughs, sharp and bitter. You climbed into 12 Messerschmitts. You should be dead. Mallory nods. The probability was 11.4% survival based on standard evasion. The vertical zoom improved it to approximately 42%. I chose the better odds. Crawford steps forward. You broke formation. You abandoned your wingman. You ignored direct orders. Hendricks clears his throat. He drew them off. The whole bloody lot went after him. We got the bombers home. Blackwood raises a hand. Silence. He looks at Mallory for a long moment. Then he stands, walks to the door, and calls for Chief Mechanic Harris. Harris arrives minutes later, wiping grease from his hands. Blackwood asks him to inspect Red 3 and report damage. Harris returns 20 minutes later with a clipboard. 3 strikes, fuselage. 1 strike, port wing root. 2 strikes, tail section. No critical damage. Engine ran hot but functional. Fuel consumption excessive but within tolerance. The aircraft is flyable. Blackwood turns back to Mallory. Did you plan this? Mallory hesitates. Then he opens his notebook and shows the pages covered in diagrams, calculations, thrust curves. He has been working on the maneuver for 3 years. He has calculated every variable, every risk, every failure mode. He simply never had the opportunity to test it under actual combat conditions until today. Blackwood studies the notebook. His expression is unreadable. He closes it and hands it back. You will write a full tactical report. You will include all calculations and assumptions. You will submit it to me by 1800 hours. Dismissed. Mallory stands, salutes, and leaves. The other pilots follow him out, whispering. In the dispersal hut, he sits alone and begins writing. His hand is steady. Outside, the sun is setting over the airfield. Spitfires are being refueled and rearmed for the next day's operations. Mechanics work under floodlights. The war continues, indifferent to one pilot's experiment. But in the intelligence section, a duty officer is already typing a preliminary report. Unorthodox, evasive maneuver employed by Flight Lieutenant Mallory. Results inconclusive, but worthy of further analysis. The report will reach Group Headquarters by morning. From there, it will spread slowly through the bureaucracy of war. Some will dismiss it, others will be curious. A few will recognize that something fundamental has shifted. Group Captain Arthur Pemberton arrives at Biggin Hill 3 days later. He is 52, a veteran of the previous war, a man who flew SE-5As over the Western Front when air combat doctrine was being written in blood. He does not announce his visit. He simply appears in the operations room and asks to see Flight Lieutenant Mallory's tactical report. Blackwood hands over the document. Pemberton reads it twice, standing at the map table, his face expressionless. Then he asks to speak with Mallory privately. They meet in a groundside office that smells of mildew and cigarette ash. Pemberton sits behind the desk. Mallory stands at attention. "Sit down, Lieutenant." Mallory sits. Pemberton taps the report. "This maneuver of yours, you claim it exploits the energy deficit of a committed attacker." "Yes, sir." Pemberton leans back. Every fighter pilot in this command has been trained to dive when bounced from altitude. "You are suggesting they have been trained incorrectly." "Not incorrectly, sir. Incompletely. The dive works when you have separation distance, and the attacker is not yet committed. But if the geometry is already fatal, diving only delays the inevitable. The climb changes the equation." Pemberton is silent for a moment. Then he asks the question that matters. Can it be taught? Mallory hesitates. The maneuver requires precise timing. Entry speed must be between 180 and 210 miles per hour. Climb angle must be 40 to 50 degrees. Duration of climb must not exceed 8 seconds or the aircraft stalls. Any pilot with adequate training can execute the mechanics. The difficulty is psychological. You are flying toward the threat. Pemberton nods slowly. He has seen men freeze in combat, seen them follow doctrine into their graves, seen the rigid adherence to training override survival instinct. He also knows that doctrine evolves, that air combat is too new, too fluid to be fully codified. He asks Mallory if he is willing to demonstrate the maneuver under controlled conditions. Mallory agrees. 2 days later, a flight of 3 Spitfires takes off from Biggin Hill. Mallory flies lead. 2 experienced pilots, both veterans with over 50 combat sorties, fly as observers. They climb to 20,000 feet over the channel. A 4th Spitfire, flown by Flight Lieutenant David Ashford, positions himself 5,000 feet above and behind. On Pemberton's radio call, Ashford rolls and dives, simulating a bounce. Mallory holds steady until the last possible moment. Then he pulls into a vertical climb. The observers watch as Ashford flashes past below, his dive too committed to adjust. Mallory reverses at the top of his zoom and ends up on Ashford's tail. They land. Ashford is shaken, but impressed. He asks to try it himself. Over the next week, 6 pilots practice the maneuver under varying conditions. 2 fail, stalling at the top of the climb and spinning out. 1 executes it perfectly, 3 achieve partial success, enough to force an overshoot but not enough to gain offensive position. The results are mixed but undeniable. The maneuver works when executed correctly. Pemberton compiles a summary. He notes that the vertical zoom is high risk and should only be employed when conventional evasion is not viable. He recommends limited integration into advanced fighter tactics training. He does not mandate its use. He simply adds it to the options available to pilots who understand the physics and possess the nerve. The summary is distributed quietly through fighter command. Some squadron leaders ignore it. Others read it with interest. A handful begin drilling their pilots on energy management and vertical maneuvering. The change is incremental, barely noticeable in the vast machinery of war, but it is real. October 1941. The weather over southern England turns gray and wet. Missions are scrubbed due to low cloud cover. Pilots sit in dispersal huts playing cards and reading month-old newspapers. Mallory uses the downtime to refine his calculations. He is working on a variation that accounts for aircraft weight and fuel load. A fully loaded Spitfire has different energy characteristics than one returning from patrol with half-empty tanks. The math is complex. He fills 3 more notebooks. On October 23rd, Flight Lieutenant Ashford leads a patrol over Maidstone. His section is bounced by 4 Messerschmitts diving from 18,000 feet. Ashford executes the vertical zoom. The lead German overshoots. Ashford reverses, gets on his tail, fires a 3-second burst. The Messerschmitt spins into the clouds, trailing smoke. Ashford returns and files a combat report that mentions the maneuver by name. Within days, other pilots begin asking questions. How fast do you need to be going? What if there are multiple attackers? Does it work against Focke-Wulf 190S? Mallory answers patiently, sketching diagrams, explaining energy states. Some pilots understand immediately. Others remain skeptical. Crawford refuses to acknowledge it, calling it a fluke that will get someone killed. But the statistics begin to shift. 66 squadrons' loss rate drops from 14% to 9% over 6 weeks. Not all of it is due to the vertical zoom. Fighter Command has improved tactics across the board. Spitfire Mark 9s, with better high-altitude performance, are entering service. But the maneuver contributes. Pilots who know it exists have another option, another tool. That alone changes how they think about engagements. In November, a captured Luftwaffe pilot is interrogated at a facility near London. He mentions frustration among German fighter units. British pilots are behaving unpredictably. Some are climbing into attacks instead of diving away. It disrupts targeting solutions. Several experienced German pilots have been caught off guard. The interrogation report reaches Fighter Command intelligence. An analyst connects it to Mallory's maneuver. A note is added to his service record. By December, the vertical zoom is being taught at the Central Gunnery School as an emergency evasive technique. Instructors demonstrate it using cine film from Ashford's combat engagement. Students practice it at altitude. The failure rate is high. One pilot dies when he stalls and spins into the ground. The training is modified. Minimum altitude for practice is set at 10,000 feet. Emphasis is placed on recognizing when not to use it. Mallory continues flying operationally. He accumulates sorties without drama. He is not an ace. He has 2 confirmed kills and 3 probables. His value is not in his score, but in his thinking. Blackwood assigns him to train new pilots. Mallory spends hours in the air, demonstrating energy management, explaining the physics of turning flight, teaching men half his age how to survive. On January 7, 1942, Mallory is flying a routine patrol when his engine fails at 12,000 feet. The cause is never determined. Mechanical failure, possibly contaminated fuel. He glides toward the coast but cannot reach land. He ditches in the channel 3 miles off Dungeness. The water is 4 degrees Celsius. He inflates his Mae West and waits for rescue. A patrol boat finds him 20 minutes later. He is hypothermic, barely conscious. He survives, but develops pneumonia. He spends 6 weeks in hospital, then another month convalescing. He does not return to combat operations. The war ends in May 1945. The Royal Air Force demobilizes thousands of pilots. Some stay in service. Most return to civilian life, carrying memories they rarely discuss. Richard Mallory is discharged with the rank of squadron leader. He returns to Cambridge and completes a doctorate in aerodynamics. His thesis examines energy management in high-performance aircraft. It is dry, technical, and largely ignored outside academic circles. He takes a position at the Royal Aircraft Establishment in Farnborough. He works on jet engine development, contributes to early supersonic research, and publishes papers that are read by engineers but not historians. He marries in 1948. He has 2 daughters. He lives quietly in a cottage outside Farnborough and tends a garden. He does not speak about the war unless directly asked. When veterans gather, he attends occasionally, stands in the back, listens. He does not tell stories. The vertical zoom maneuver outlives its creator. In the 1950s, the United States Air Force adopts a similar technique for jet fighters facing high-speed intercepts. It is called the vertical displacement maneuver. The physics are identical. The name is different. No mention is made of a Spitfire pilot over the channel. Soviet fighter doctrine incorporates energy tactics that include vertical escapes during the same period. The Germans, rebuilding their air force, study wartime combat reports and note the effectiveness of unpredictable maneuvering against committed attackers. In the 1960s, during the Vietnam War, American pilots rediscover the value of using the vertical plane defensively. Navy aviators call it going ballistic. Air Force pilots call it the vector roll. The principle remains unchanged. Trade airspeed for altitude, force the attacker to overshoot, reverse the engagement. Fighter Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base teaches it as foundational energy management. Instructors use diagrams that would look familiar to anyone who read Mallory's notebooks. Modern air combat maneuvering incorporates the concept so thoroughly that it is no longer considered innovative. It is simply part of the language of flight. Thrust-to-weight ratios, specific excess power energy eggs. The terminology has evolved, but the underlying truth has not. A climbing aircraft can exploit the committed energy state of a diving attacker if the geometry and timing are correct. Richard Mallory dies in 1976 at the age of 63. His obituary in the Times mentions his work at Farnborough and his wartime service. It does not mention the maneuver. His notebooks are donated to the RAF Museum. They sit in an archive, occasionally referenced by researchers writing about tactical evolution during the Battle of Britain. Most visitors walk past without noticing. In fighter squadrons around the world, young pilots learn to manage energy, to think in 3 dimensions, to understand that altitude and airspeed are interchangeable currencies. They practice vertical maneuvers in simulators and in the air. They do not know the name of the man who first proved it could work under fire. Some legacies are carved in stone. Others are written in equations and passed quietly through generations of pilots who understand that physics does not care about courage or fear. It simply describes what is possible. Mallory understood that. He trusted the math when no one else would, and in doing so, he gave desperate men one more chance to come home.